You know what's fascinating? The idea that our own consciousness might be the creative force behind everything we experience. Today, we're exploring a radical perspective that turns traditional spirituality on its head.
That's quite a bold claim to start with. How does this perspective actually work in practice?
Well, imagine consciousness as being like empty space. It has no form itself, but gives form to everything within it. The author uses this metaphor to explain how our awareness shapes reality.
So in other words, our basic sense of I am or existence is what creates our experience.
Exactly right, and here's where it gets really interesting. The text explains that the one thing all humans have in common is this awareness of being. It's what some call God, but it's actually our own consciousness.
That's pretty mind-bending when you think about it. How does this relate to people's everyday experiences?
Well, take something simple like feeling wealthy versus feeling poor. The author argues that whichever state you're conscious of being will automatically express itself in your reality, just like water takes the shape of whatever container it's in.
But surely external circumstances play a huge role in our experiences too.
That's where this teaching becomes really radical. It suggests that what we see as external circumstances are actually projections of our consciousness. There's this fascinating quote, "You eternally objectify that which you are conscious of being."
So if someone wanted to change their circumstances, they would need to change their consciousness first rather than trying to change things directly.
Exactly. And here's a powerful example from the text. It's like a sculptor who sees the finished masterpiece already existing within the marble. They don't create it. They reveal it by removing what's hiding it.
That's quite a beautiful metaphor, but how does someone actually put this into practice?
Well, the author gives specific techniques. One is what he calls spiritual circumcision, removing the veils of identity like race, nationality, family roles that limit our sense of pure awareness.
You know what's interesting about that? It reminds me of modern psychological concepts about letting go of limiting beliefs.
Right? And he takes it even further with biblical metaphors. He reinterprets the crucifixion as consciousness being nailed to a new concept of self, and resurrection as that new identity coming to life.
That's such an unexpected interpretation of those religious symbols. What about people who struggle with negative self-concepts?
The text addresses this directly with what he calls the law of consciousness. To him that hath, to him shall be given. It means whatever state you're conscious of being will multiply and express itself more fully.
Well, that could sound pretty harsh to someone who's struggling.
You raise a good point, but here's the empowering part. It means anyone can change their experience by changing their consciousness. The author emphasizes that this power is equally available to everyone.
That makes more sense. What about the role of time in all this? Does it matter how long it takes to see changes?
This is one of the most fascinating aspects. The text argues that time is essentially an illusion. The key is to feel your desire as already fulfilled now, rather than projecting it into the future.
That seems like it would be really challenging for most people to do.
It definitely requires practice. The author suggests starting with small things to build your confidence. He gives an example of feeling the naturalness of having something before it appears physically.
Speaking of practice, what specific techniques does he recommend?
The main technique is what he calls I am, catching yourself whenever you say I will be or I want to be, and shifting to I am in the present tense. He says this aligns you with the creative power of consciousness.
That's quite different from typical goal-setting approaches that focus on future achievements.
Absolutely right, and here's why that matters. When we're always projecting our desires into the future, we're actually affirming their absence in the present. It's like telling consciousness, I don't have this now.
You know, that really shifts how I think about the whole manifestation concept.
And there's another crucial aspect, the role of feeling. The author emphasizes that it's not enough to just say the words I am. You have to feel the naturalness of being what you desire.
That reminds me of recent neuroscience findings about how emotion helps encode new patterns in the brain.
Interesting connection. The text actually anticipates a lot of modern scientific insights about consciousness and reality creation. He was writing this in 1960, well before many of these ideas became mainstream.
What about dealing with setbacks or when things don't seem to be working?
The author addresses this directly. He says what appears as failure is often just a misunderstanding of the law. If we react to appearances, we perpetuate them. The key is maintaining the feeling of the wish fulfilled despite appearances.
That takes real mental discipline.
It does. And that's why he emphasises starting with small things to build your confidence. Think of it like building a muscle. You start with lighter weights before trying to lift heavy ones.
Looking at the bigger picture, what do you think are the implications of these ideas for society as a whole?
Well, if consciousness really is the fundamental creative force, it suggests that collective transformation starts with individual transformation. Change your consciousness, change your world.
That's quite a powerful message to end on.
Indeed it is. And perhaps the most important takeaway is that this power isn't something we need to acquire. It's what we already are, just waiting to be recognised and used consciously.